been feeling uncomfortable about the message today, you're not alone. Because many people get uncomfortable when the topic of money comes up. And many pastors sweat through their shirts as they contemplate having to do the annual stewardship sermon. We don't like to talk about money in general society, and we certainly don't like talking about money in church. When people do like talking about money, we usually find that it's to brag about having a lot of it, right? And that's just annoying, so we don't talk about money. And our money is hard to come by. It goes out as fast as it comes in, it seems. There's always a demand on our money, and much of it feels like it is out of our control. And I'm about to have a kid in college, right? Oh boy. But believe it or not, this particular teaching of Jesus is actually on the schedule for today. There's a schedule of scriptures that many churches follow called the lectionary, which sets out 4 scriptures for every Sunday, and it's on a 3-year cycle. So this scripture comes up every 3 years on the 25th Sunday after Pentecost, which is today. Perhaps those that put the schedule together did this on purpose, to help us preachers, so that they don't, that don't really want to talk about money, to kind of force us into it. I don't know, but it's on the schedule for today. And actually, it really isn't that surprising that a scripture about money would come up in the fall, because Jesus talked about money all the time. More than anything else, he talked about money. So it must be an important part of our discipleship. Now, in this teaching, Jesus is pointing to the legal experts again. These men are one of Jesus' favorite examples of what not to do. Now, I don't think that they were really enemies of Jesus. I think they were faithful. They were faithful men, and I believe that Jesus recognized that they were trying to be faithful. On the other hand, Jesus felt the need to correct them and to correct their teaching and their example quite often. In this case, he was railing on their showiness. If the legal experts that Jesus was pointing out were living in today's world, I think we would see them in designer clothes. They would carry expensive bags, they would wear expensive jewelry, they would drive exotic cars, and they would have several homes. And so now what comes into my mind is a Saudi prince. We could probably look a little bit closer to home, a little less extravagant, but that's the picture that I'm getting. Which of course means that we don't need to worry about being in this category of extravagance. We're nowhere near there, right? But that's the picture here. And Jesus puts up a very poor woman as the opposite example of these legal experts. The legal experts walk around in long robes, it says. So what's the big deal about long robes? Well, first of all, have you ever worn a long robe? As a pastor, I sometimes get to wear a long robe. Now, women, if you've worn a long dress or a long skirt, what can you tell me about the practicality of a long dress? How easy is it to get around in one of those? How about walking up the stairs? It's terrible, right? It's terrible to have to do that. And so on those rare occasions that I get to wear my long robe, I often have to kneel. And I got to tell you that every time I have to get back up from kneeling in that robe, my feet get caught in the bottom of my robe. And as I'm standing up, it like jerks on me, and I almost always end up on the ground. Every time. It's just not practical, which is why I don't wear it every Sunday, right? So Jesus is pointing out that these men who are wearing this impractical clothing, these long robes, they're not doing manual labor for work. They're not wearing clothes that would allow them to work easily. So they must have a desk job. Now, there's nothing wrong with desk jobs. I enjoy mine. But he was talking to his disciples and others who had to work for a living. That's what I hear people who do manual labor say, right? I actually work for a living. I hear that. But he's talking to people who are doing manual labor. These men in the long robes have easy jobs, and they're used to being seen as men of honor. They like to be greeted with honor in the markets. They sit in places of honor in the synagogues. They wait for, people wait for them to show up before they start the fall party. Oh wait, that was me, right? So I relate to these folks quite a bit in this passage. And then Jesus ratchets it up a notch. And Jesus likes to do that. He says that they cheat widows out of their homes. Apparently it was a common practice for these religious leaders to advise widows about various things. They would tell them how to manage their estates. And they would give them advice about how to deal with business people. And they would tell them how to do the things that their husbands used to do. And in return, they would charge them a sum for their services. And they justified this by praying for the widows. And they would give long, showy prayers. The longer the prayer, the higher the price. Let us pray. Some would even go so far to convince the widow to leave their estate to the church. And in those days, if you left your estate to the church, it would eventually end up in the pockets of the leader. Jesus then sees a widow on the street. She walks up to the deposit box, and just as they had been watching the legal experts do, she drops money into the box. And there's a stark contrast between the very expensive clothes of the religious leaders that he sees and the humble clothes of this widow. And the leaders have been dropping large sums in the box, and like the children earlier, you could hear the difference from across the street. And then she makes her offering, and you couldn't even hear it. Could it be that this is one of the widows that these men have cheated? Now Jesus tells us that the gift of this poor woman was considered more than all the giving that had happened that day. And the common teaching of this scripture would be that since this woman gave a higher percentage of her income, her gift was actually better than the rich men who gave noisy amounts, very noisy amounts. Now, I don't think that this teaching is wrong. I think Jesus is really trying to ratchet up the stakes here. He's clearly praising this poor widow and her gift over the legal experts. And of course, that means that we are called to match her gift, right? She gave all she had. And so Jesus is telling us that if we want to be like her, we need to give all we have. So get out your wallets. But Jesus also tells us that we're not supposed to worry about money. If God takes care of the birds, then surely God will take care of us. If you gave everything, I'm guessing you might worry about your electric bill. And so that can't be what Jesus wants. He doesn't want us to have to worry about where stuff is coming from for us. He must not want us to give absolutely everything. See, I don't think that Jesus is talking about the amount that we give here. The woman is the example that we should follow, and she gave hardly anything. I don't think that Jesus is talking about the percentage we give, because Jesus didn't tell his disciples to give everything. He did tell the rich young ruler to give everything, but he only did that after he kept pestering him about what he needed to do to be more faithful. So instead, I think that Jesus is pointing to her attitude that she's giving. Now, what does the scripture say about her attitude? Nothing, right? But who can give everything they have? Who among us can give their last penny? I've never done that. I've never given my last dollar, not really. Now, I've emptied out my wallet, but it has never been my last dollar. I've always had something in reserve. I've always had something in the bank that I can go and retrieve. And this woman gave everything. Who can do that? Well, it's got to be somebody who's very secure. She must know that even if she gives everything, she's going to be okay. That even without any money left, she's going to be okay. Now, we're not told how exactly. Perhaps she has family that will care for her. Perhaps she knows that she can just go down and beg for food in the market. But because her appearance tells Jesus she's poor, it's likely that she didn't have anything in reserve. And yet she gave everything. And rightfully so, Jesus points her out as a remarkable woman. Remarkable woman. How can we be like her? Well, how about if we could have the same level of gratitude for what we have, for what God has given us? This woman in her faith knows that she can rely on God to give her what she needs. She isn't worried about her coins. She has God. She's grateful for how God has provided for her and has no doubt that God will continue to provide for her. So she's grateful. She's so grateful that she gives what she has out of faith. One of my favorite sayings is on a sign that I'm going to have Peg put up here. Happy people. It's not happy people who are grateful. It's grateful people who are happy. That's the lesson here. When we're grateful, then we're happy. And it isn't the stuff that makes us grateful. It isn't the security that makes us happy. It isn't the honor that makes us happy. In those times of my life when I haven't been happy, it's because I don't think I have enough. I long for more. And that can be a good motivator for us, right? It can drive us to achieve or to build or to create. That sense of dissatisfaction is very powerful in our lives, but it can also be dangerous because it can lead to greed and it can drive us to get satisfaction at all costs, even at the expense of others. However, when we're grateful for what we have, that is when we're truly happy. When we realize that we have all that we need, when we're satisfied, it frees us to see the things around us that really matter. Family, home, relationships, faith. And when we recognize that, then it's easy to give. When we see what our God has provided us, it's easy to give. That's why the woman can give her last penny. And I don't think that God is asking that of us. I'm sure that God would be okay with it if you gave everything you had. But God isn't asking for our last penny, and neither am I. But if you're grateful, if you're happy, and you are compelled to give to God out of that gratitude, then you are like this woman. I mentioned earlier, and I'm just going to say it again here, next week we're going to ask you to tell us what you're planning to give to God in support of the ministries of St. Luke. And we're not telling you what to give. I'm not even asking you to make a big sacrifice. This isn't a tax. You do have a choice. It isn't a fee, but it is a sign of your discipleship. And it's an act of faith. And it's a reflection of gratitude. And while you're thinking about this, if Jesus decides to ratchet it up a notch for you, well, can't really do anything about that, right? Would you pray with me? God, we thank you for the ways in which you compel us. That you work on our hearts. But also for the ways in which you provide for us always, so that we don't have to worry about what's coming next, that we can just rely on you, God. And it is in that reliance on you that we'll think this week about what you are calling us to do. In your name we pray.